The funeral procession disappeared into the autumn mist, leaving behind only the whisper of departing carriages and the echo of prayers. Isabella Craighill knelt before a freshly carved stone marker, her gloved hands pressed against the cold granite as if she could somehow reach through it. Her honey-blonde braids had come loose during the long ceremony, strands clinging to her tear-streaked face. She didn't try to fix them. Fixing things would mean she still believed appearances mattered. But the mourning grounds were empty now, save for the wind and the few courtiers watching from their carriages at a distance, murmuring behind lace fans and jeweled fingers. Isabella Craighill remained perfectly still as the last carriage wheels faded beyond the iron gates. She was young, too young, they said, and the cream of her mourning dress seemed to catch the fading light unfairly, making her look more like a ghost than a widow. The fabric was carefully mended at the elbows, pressed and proper despite 3 days of grief. She had chosen that dress because Edmund always said cream softened her features. But even his kindness couldn't hide the fact that she was alone now, abandoned at a graveside that smelled of turned earth, dying roses and broken futures. No one came for her. Not Edmund's family, who had made their judgment clear at the reading of the will. Not the court ladies who had once sought her company when her husband held favor. They weren't here. Not with comfort, not with support, not with decency. She shifted slightly, her knees aching against the damp ground. Her small traveling bag rested beside the headstone, a worn leather piece that had belonged to her mother, now cracked at the corners. A woman of softer pride might have accepted the coin Edmund's cousin offered, the charity that came with conditions and control. But Isabella sat rigid, breathing, enduring. 2 young pages darted past the cemetery fence, their laughter bright and careless in the gray afternoon. One chased the other until he nearly stumbled over a fallen branch near the gate. He paused, caught sight of her kneeling figure, then stared with the blunt curiosity of youth. She met his eyes with quiet dignity. Her mother always said strength didn't have to announce itself. The boy hesitated. "You all right, miss?" "No," Isabella answered softly, her voice raw from crying. "But I will be." The boy blinked, unsure what to say to that kind of honesty. A deeper voice cut through the moment. "Enough, Garrett. Show some respect." The man approaching moved like someone who had buried too many people. Long leather coat, mud-splattered boots, silver-white hair pulled back from a face that looked carved from winter itself. He wasn't dressed like the perfumed nobles who'd sneered at her during the funeral. He was just a man trying to stay standing in a world that kept taking things from him. Darren Brave. Even without introduction, Isabella recognized the Alpha King. Everyone in the kingdom knew that haunted profile. He stopped a respectful distance away, removing his riding gloves. "Ma'am." The page darted back toward the castle road, casting one last curious glance over his shoulder. Darren remained, his presence somehow both commanding and careful. "Do you need an escort somewhere?" His voice was low, meant only for her. Isabella's fingers tightened on the gravestone. "I don't suppose you know where widows without family go in this kingdom?" Darren's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his storm-gray eyes. "I know the kingdom doesn't make it easy." A bitter laugh escaped her lips, sharp and unexpected. Easy would have been Edmund living. This is something else entirely. He didn't offer platitudes. Just looked at her with a kind of understanding that didn't try to minimize the pain. Isabella found herself grateful for that. It was an understanding born from someone who knew loss had weight you couldn't just set down. "My name is Darren Brave," he said finally, though they both knew she already knew. "I have a throne that sits empty beside mine, a court that questions every decision I make, and a kingdom that's tearing itself apart because I haven't produced an heir or secured an alliance." Isabella slowly rose to her feet, brushing dirt from her dress. "That sounds like you need a political marriage to someone who can bring you armies or gold." "I need someone who understands that leadership is built on sacrifice," he corrected. "Someone who knows what it means to lose everything and choose to keep standing anyway." She studied his face. The lines of old battles, the exhaustion in his eyes, the barely contained desperation of a man running out of time. "Your Majesty, I appreciate whatever this is, but I'm not." "You loved him fiercely." Darren's words were quiet but certain. "I watched you at the funeral. While everyone else performed their grief, you broke under the weight of yours." He took a step closer, close enough that she could see the silver threading through his hair wasn't just from age but from stress. That's the kind of loyalty my kingdom is dying for. Isabella's breath caught. You don't know anything about me. I know you're standing here alone because you wouldn't compromise your dignity for his family's coin. His gaze was steady. I know the court dismissed you the moment Edmund died because you brought no title, no connections, no value in their eyes. He paused. And I know that makes you the strongest person in this graveyard. The wind picked up, scattering dead leaves across the path between them. Somewhere in the distance, bells told the hour. Do you have anywhere to go? He asked. No. I see. He was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words. My first wife died in childbirth. Political arrangement. We respected each other, but there was no love. Just duty. His jaw tightened. I failed her. Failed to give her anything real before she gave everything. Isabella folded her arms, unsure where he was leading. My kingdom needs a Luna queen, Darren continued. Not for decoration. Not for alliances. But because without one the pack laws say I'm incomplete. Weak. He met her eyes fully. They're circling Isabella. Rival packs, ambitious nobles, my own cousins. They're waiting for me to make one more mistake so they can justify tearing everything down. Isabella stared at him, her heart pounding. I'm not offering you pity, Darren said, his voice firm. You look like a woman who's had more than enough of that. Her jaw clenched. I'm offering you a name that carries weight, a position that demands respect, and a chance to build something that matters. He took one more step, close enough now that she could see the desperation he was barely containing. I need a queen who knows what it means to fight for something worth keeping. Someone who won't shatter when the crown gets heavy. You're asking me to marry you. The words felt absurd even as she said them. You don't know me. You don't. I know enough. His voice dropped lower, almost gentle. I know that you're still kneeling here, fighting to honor him when everyone else has already moved on. That's more spine than my entire court combined. Isabella's vision blurred with fresh tears, but these felt different. Not the tears of loss, but of something dangerously close to hope. Marry me today, Darren said. Not for love. Not for romance. But because we both need a reason to keep fighting, and maybe we can be that for each other. She looked back at Edmund's grave, at the flowers already wilting against the stone. Then back at the Alpha King, at this stranger offering her an impossible choice that somehow felt like the only choice. Why me? She whispered. You could have anyone. Because you chose him when no one else would have, Darren answered simply. And when you make a choice you don't let go. That's what I need. That's who you are. The graveyard fell silent except for the wind through the bare trees. Isabella Craighill took a shaking breath, tasting autumn air and impossible possibilities. She thought about Edmund, about what he would say if he could speak. He would tell her to live. To not let his death be the end of her story. One question, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. If I say yes, do I get to choose this? Or am I just trading one form of obligation for another? Darren's expression softened just slightly. You choose. Every day. That's what makes it real. She looked at his extended hand, scarred, steady, waiting. All right, Isabella said quietly. I'll be your queen. His fingers closed around hers, calloused and warm. Then let's go shock a kingdom, Darren said. And as they walked away from the gravestone together, Isabella Craighill felt something she hadn't felt since Edmund died. The terrifying, exhilarating possibility of a future. Before we continue with Isabella and Darren's story, join the pack. If you're already howling with excitement for this tale of a struggling Alpha King and his unexpected Luna Queen, show your loyalty by hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. And let me know in the comments, where in the world is my pack watching from tonight? Are you Team Isabella or Team Darren? Drop your location and your thoughts below. Now let's return to the graveyard. They walked in silence toward the ancient oak that stood sentinel over the oldest graves. Isabella's legs trembled, but she refused to stumble. Darren stayed half a step behind, his presence solid but not encroaching. Edmund Craighill, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Minor knight in the King's Guard. He died 3 weeks ago defending a village from raiders on the northern border. Her fingers twisted in her skirt. They said he could have retreated. That it wasn't his fight. But Edmund never walked away when people needed him. Darren stopped, his expression unreadable. I remember the report. 6 families saved. 1 night lost. He paused. The kingdom mourned a hero. You lost a husband. I lost everything. The words came out sharper than she intended. His family took the lands, the title, even the house. Apparently, widows inherit charity, not property. And still you stayed to see him properly buried. Darren's voice carried something that might have been respect. My advisors told me to send a representative. I came because I owed him that much. I didn't expect to find you here. Alone. Isabella lifted her chin. I'm stronger than I look. I know. He moved to stand beside her, both of them facing Edmund's grave. My kingdom is fracturing, Isabella. Without a Luna Queen, Pack Law views me as incomplete. Weak. My own council questions every decision. Rival alphas test our borders. Nobles position their daughters like chess pieces, each one thinking they can control a king through marriage. His jaw tightened. I don't need another player in the game. I need someone who understands what it means to fight for something real. She turned to face him fully. You're asking me to be your queen. I'm asking you to be my partner. His gray eyes held hers. I don't need a princess who'll wilt under pressure. I need someone who knows loss, who understands sacrifice, who won't shatter when the crown gets heavy. He drew a breath. Marry me. Today. The world seemed to tilt. Isabella's heart hammered against her ribs. Your Majesty, Why you? He anticipated her question. Because you're still here, kneeling in the dirt, fighting to honor a man the world has already forgotten. That's the kind of loyalty kingdoms are built on. That's more spine than my entire court combined. Isabella looked back at the gravestone, at Edmund's name carved in stone. She imagined his voice, gentle and encouraging. Live, Isabella. Don't let my death be your ending. Yes, she whispered, the word barely audible. Then stronger. Yes. I'll marry you. Not as surrender. Not as escape. But as a choice to live rather than merely exist. Darren extended his hand. Then let's go claim a throne. The royal carriage cut through the capital streets as twilight painted the sky in shades of amber and blood. Isabella sat rigid against the velvet cushions, watching the castle spires grow closer. Beside her, Darren said nothing, but his presence filled the silence like a promise, or a warning. Servants scattered as they entered the castle courtyard. Whispers erupted like wildfire. A stable boy dropped his bucket. A chambermaid pressed herself against the stone wall, eyes wide with shock. The Alpha King had left for a funeral alone. He returned with a bride. Your Majesty, this is highly irregular. The high priest's voice echoed through the chapel as they entered, still in their mourning clothes, still carrying the scent of the graveyard. He stood before the altar, his ornate robes gleaming in candlelight, his face a mask of barely concealed disapproval. Irregular times require bold action, Father Dimitri. Darren's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Not a request. Not a suggestion. A command that made the air itself feel heavier. The priest's jaw worked silently. Behind them, courtiers began filing in, drawn by gossip, by scandal, by the irresistible pull of watching their king make what they surely believed was a catastrophic mistake. Lady Serena Ashford stood near the back, her beautiful face arranged in an expression of sympathetic concern that didn't quite hide the calculation in her eyes. Isabella's hands trembled as she took her place beside Darren. The priest's words washed over her like water, familiar and foreign all at once. She'd stood here before. No, a different chapel, a smaller ceremony with Edmund's shy smile and gentle hands. Do you, Isabella Craighill, take this man? Her breath caught. The words stuck in her throat. Edmund's face flickered in her memory, his voice on their wedding day. I promise to always choose you. Darren's hand found hers, his grip firm but gentle. Grounding. His thumb traced a small circle against her palm, a silent message. I'm here. You're not alone. Isabella exhaled slowly and met the priest's eyes. I do. Not to erase what was. Not to replace who she'd loved. But to claim the life she still had left to live. They exchanged simple silver bands. No gems, no engravings, no time for anything but metal and meaning. The priest's blessing sounded reluctant, but it was enough. As they turned to face the court, Darren leaned close, his voice meant only for her. You're not his replacement. You're my choice. The words settled something fierce and fragile in her chest. They walked down the aisle together, past stunned faces and scandalized whispers, past judgment and disbelief. The new queen and her king, bound by necessity but choosing, in this moment, to stand together. The castle doors closed behind them with a finality that sounded like both an ending and a beginning. The queen's chambers stretched before Isabella like a cathedral, all vaulted ceilings and shadows, tapestries faded by years of neglect. Dust motes danced in the moonlight streaming through tall windows. The air smelled of disuse and lavender sachets gone stale. "My mother's rooms," Darren said quietly, lighting a candelabra on the mantel. The flames cast his silver hair in gold. "She died when I was 15. No one's slept here since." Isabella traced her fingers along the carved bedpost, feeling the cold bite of abandoned wood. "And your first wife?" "Lived in the East Wing." His voice went flat. "Her choice. Our marriage was arranged by councils and treaties. We were strangers who shared a title and nothing else." He moved to the window, staring out at the darkened kingdom. "She died in childbirth. The baby with her. I was away putting down a rebellion on the border. I wasn't there when she needed me most." The weight of his guilt filled the room like smoke. "I failed her," Darren continued. "Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't know how to be more than a king. I gave her a crown when what she needed was a partner." He turned to face Isabella. "I won't make that mistake again." Isabella wrapped her arms around herself. "What are you asking of me? Stand with me when they try to tear us both down." His eyes met hers across the vast room. "I'm not asking you to love me. I'm not asking you to forget him. I'm asking you to be my equal in this fight." He gestured to the massive four-poster bed. "This is yours. I'll take the sitting room next door." When she started to protest, he held up a hand. "I won't touch you until you ask me to, Isabella. This marriage is real. The court will see that, the pack will accept it. But how we build it, that's yours to shape." Isabella's throat tightened with something dangerously close to gratitude. "Sleep," Darren said, moving toward the adjoining door. "Tomorrow the Real battle begins." He left her alone in the queen's chambers, the door clicking softly shut. Isabella sank onto the bed, still wearing her mourning dress, her silver wedding band catching the candlelight. The mattress was too soft, the room too large, the silence too complete. He should feel trapped, terrified, lost. Instead, for the first time since Edmund's death, she felt something unexpected, safe. She lay back, staring at the canopy above, and let exhaustion finally claim her. Dawn came too soon. A maid Isabella didn't know laid out a dress she hadn't chosen, deep emerald silk that felt like armor against her skin. Her reflection in the mirror showed a stranger, a woman wearing a crown that didn't yet fit. The council chamber fell silent when she entered. 12 pairs of eyes tracked her every movement, the way she held her skirts, the slight hesitation before taking the seat beside Darren's throne, the work-roughened hands she tried to hide beneath the table. "Good morning, Your Majesty." Lady Serena Ashford's voice dripped honey and poison in equal measure. She sat 3 seats down, her burgundy gown cut to perfection, her dark hair arranged in elaborate braids that probably required an hour and 3 servants. "What a surprising choice our king has made. So very unexpected." The councillors exchanged glances. Lord Pemberton, the treasurer, studied Isabella like an accountant finding errors in a ledger. Duchess Margrave smiled with all teeth and no warmth. "Quite sudden, wasn't it?" Serena continued, delicately cutting her fruit. "One wonders if such hasty arrangements can be considered permanent." Isabella's hands clenched beneath the table. The room felt too hot, too small, despite its vaulted ceilings. Every breath seemed too loud. Darren's hand found hers beneath the table, his thumb pressing once against her palm. That single touch steadied her, reminded her she wasn't alone on this battlefield. "The Queen's lineage may not boast generations of nobility," Darren said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade, "but her character boasts something far rarer, integrity." His gray eyes swept the table. "Perhaps that's an unfamiliar concept to some of you." The threat in his words hung heavy in the air. General Rowan, a grizzled wolf with silver streaking his dark beard, watched Isabella with shrewd eyes. He said nothing during the meal, but afterward, as the council dispersed, he approached her in the corridor. "Walk with me, Your Majesty." Not a request. They moved through the gardens, away from listening ears. "You're quiet, he observed. That's smart. Court is a pack that feeds on weakness. They'll push until you break or bite back. I'm not sure I know how to bite, Isabella admitted. You will. His voice carried certainty. You stood in that room and didn't run. That's the first lesson. He glanced at her. They're testing you. Every word, every look, every slight. Waiting for you to prove you're not strong enough for this crown. Isabella stopped walking, understanding crystallizing like ice in her chest. They want me to fail. They want you to run, Rowan corrected. Don't give them that satisfaction. She looked back at the castle, at the windows where courtiers surely watched, and whispered. I won't, Isabella said softly. I didn't survive losing everything just to surrender now. 2 weeks of learning to navigate the court's treacherous waters had left Isabella exhausted but standing. She was beginning to understand the language of half-truths and political maneuvers, beginning to see the chessboard laid out before her. Then the letter arrived. The royal courier delivered it during breakfast, the wax seal bearing a crest Isabella recognized with immediate dread, the Vale family arms. Her hands trembled as she broke the seal, Darren watching her carefully from across the table. The words swam before her eyes, each one more poisonous than the last. Lady Isabella Craighill. It has come to my attention that you have entered into a hasty arrangement with the crown. As the nearest male relative to your late husband Sir Edmund Craighill, I must assert my legal rights under the laws of kinship and inheritance. Your dowry lands, bestowed upon Edmund and therefore passing to his bloodline, remain under Vale protection. More importantly, your welfare as a widow falls under my guardianship. A widow belongs to her family, my dear. This unseemly marriage, contracted without proper counsel or family consent, cannot stand. Return to where you're needed, where you're understood, where you belong. Or I shall be forced to come retrieve what is mine. Your devoted cousin by marriage, Lord Matthias Vale. Isabella's vision blurred, not with tears, but with fury so bright it burned away everything else. She stood abruptly, the chair scraping against stone, and crossed to where Darren sat. She thrust the letter into his hands without a word. The temperature in the room seemed to drop as he read. His jaw tightened, his eyes going from storm gray to something darker, something predatory. When he finally looked up, his voice was dangerously quiet. He dares. He wants to use me to delegitimize you, Isabella said, her voice shaking with rage, not fear. To say you stole another man's property. That your marriage to me is invalid. That your claim to... She stopped, the full implications crashing over her. He's positioning himself as a rival to your authority. Darren rose slowly, the letter crumpling slightly in his fist. Then Lord Matthias Vale will learn what happens when someone threatens my queen. His eyes met hers and she saw something fierce and protective blazing there. He thinks you're a pawn. We'll show him you're the queen on this board. He'll come, Isabella said. This isn't just a threat. He's announcing his intentions. Let him. Darren moved to the window, already calculating. We'll be ready. General Rowan needs to know. We fortify your legitimacy, document every legal precedent. When Vale arrives, he'll find not a frightened widow, but a Luna queen with a kingdom at her back. Isabella joined him at the window, looking out over the castle grounds. This is only the first move, isn't it? Yes, Darren admitted. But we're learning to play together. That makes us stronger than he knows. Dawn came cold and merciless. Isabella stood in the training courtyard, her breath misting in the autumn air, a practice blade heavy in her hand. Around the perimeter, pack warriors watched with barely concealed skepticism, a queen playing at being a soldier. Again, Darren commanded, circling her like a wolf assessing prey. You're telegraphing every move. Your enemy will read you before you strike. Isabella lunged, but he sidestepped easily, his blade tapping her ribs where a real knife would have slid between them. She bit back frustration and reset her stance. Politics won't save you if Vale brings armed men, Darren said, not unkindly. You need to know how to defend yourself. How to command a room without raising your voice. How to make people think twice before testing you. Day after day she trained. Knife work until her palms bled. Strategy lessons with General Rowan until her head ached. Posture drills that left her back burning. The courtiers whispered. Lady Serena laughed behind her fan. But the warriors began to watch differently, noting how Isabella returned each morning despite bruises, How she refused to quit even when exhaustion made her hands shake. The breakthrough came during the third week. Isabella sparred with a young warrior named Garrett, the same page who'd seen her at Edmund's funeral. He was fast, cocky, pulling his strikes but not by much. When he swept her legs, she went down hard, the impact driving air from her lungs. Darren appeared above her, hand extended. Isabella stared at that offered hand, remembering every time someone had tried to help her up as if she couldn't manage alone. She planted her palms on the cold stone and pushed herself to standing, meeting Darren's eyes with quiet defiance. Something shifted in his expression. The corner of his mouth lifted, not a smirk, not pity, but genuine pride. "There's my queen." The warriors murmured approval. Garrett nodded respect. And Isabella felt something crack open in her chest. Not weakness but possibility. That night they sat in the war room reviewing maps and letters, planning for Vale's arrival. Somewhere between strategy and exhaustion, Darren's hand found hers across the table. Neither acknowledged it. Neither pulled away. They shared quiet meals in the evenings. Late-night conversations that started about politics and drifted into stories. His childhood before the crown, her life with Edmund. Unspoken understanding woven between words. Isabella began to feel something she hadn't dared since the funeral. Hope. Not for love, perhaps. Not yet. But for partnership. For belonging. For a future that didn't feel like merely surviving. And that terrified her more than any blade. The storm broke on a night meant for celebration. Lady Serena's autumn banquet filled the great hall with candlelight and false warmth. Nobles adorned in silks and jewels, laughter sharp as broken glass. Isabella wore midnight blue velvet, her crown feeling heavier with each passing moment. She'd studied the etiquette, memorized the protocols, but theory and practice were different battlefields. Then General Rowan appeared at Darren's side, whispering urgently. The king's expression hardened. "The northern pack. They've crossed the border, hit 3 villages." His eyes found Isabella's across the room, an apology and a promise warring in that glance. "I have to go." "I know," she said, though fear clawed at her throat. He squeezed her hand once, brief and fierce. "Don't let them break you." The moment he left, the atmosphere shifted. Predators sensing wounded prey. "Your Majesty looks troubled." Lady Serena materialized at Isabella's elbow, her smile poisonous. "Surely a queen should be accustomed to her husband riding off to war? Or perhaps your brief experience with marriage hasn't prepared you for such duties." Before Isabella could respond, the hall doors crashed open. Lord Matthias Vale entered like a storm, 6 armed men at his back, parchment clutched in his bejeweled hand. He was tall, handsome in a cold way, his dark hair swept back from a face that wore cruelty like fashion. "I demand an audience with Lady Isabella Craighill," he announced, his voice carrying to every corner. The room fell silent, every eye turning toward the high table where Isabella stood alone. "You mean Queen Isabella," General Rowan said from his position near the door, hand on his sword. "I mean," Vale said, striding forward, "the widow who belongs under my family's protection. The woman taken advantage of by a desperate king who needed legitimacy more than he valued propriety." He held up the parchment. "I have documents proving this marriage was contracted under duress, without family consent, in violation of widowhood laws." Isabella's heart hammered, but she kept her spine straight. The court watched, hungry, waiting to see if their upstart queen would crumble. Vale stopped before the dais, his smile cold. "Come home, Isabella. This charade has gone far enough. You're not a queen. You're a grieving widow who made a mistake." He extended his hand like she was a child to be collected. "Let me rectify this embarrassment before it destroys what little reputation you have left." The silence stretched like a blade at her throat. Every courtier leaned forward, waiting. Lady Serena's eyes glittered with anticipation. The test Isabella had been training for was here, and Darren wasn't beside her to weather it. She was alone. And she had to choose, retreat or stand. Vale's fingers closed around Isabella's wrist like a shackle, his grip deliberately bruising. "Come now, dear cousin. Let's discuss this privately, away from these." Something deep within Isabella fractured, but not into pieces. Into wings. She wrenched her arm free with a strength that surprised them both, her movement sharp enough to silence the entire hall. The candlelight caught the fire in her honey-colored eyes as she stepped forward, not back, closing the distance between them until Vale had to retreat. I am no man's property. Her voice didn't rise, but it filled every corner of the great hall, steady as stone, sharp as winter wind. Not yours, Lord Vale. Not even the king's. I am his queen by choice, and I will defend this kingdom with everything I am. Vale's face twisted. You foolish girl. You've been funding the northern pack raids. The words cut clean through his protest. Isabella pulled a sealed letter from her sleeve, one of many she'd collected during sleepless nights of investigation. Every attack coordinated through your intermediaries. Every destabilization calculated to make you appear the savior when Darren fell. The gasps rippled through the assembled nobles like stones dropping into still water. Isabella's gaze swept the room and something ancient stirred in her bearing. The Luna her pack had needed, the queen she'd been forging herself into through fire and loss. She didn't command through volume. She commanded through absolute, undeniable presence. Your Majesty. General Rowan's gravelly voice broke the silence as he stepped forward, fist over heart. The pack pledges its loyalty to our Luna Queen. Behind him, warriors dropped to one knee in waves. Vale's armed escort lowered their weapons, surrounded and outmatched. The guards moved in and Vale's furious protests faded as they led him away. Isabella stood frozen in the aftermath, her hands beginning to tremble only after the threat had passed. The corridor outside felt impossibly cold after the heated hall, and she pressed her back against the stone wall, breathing hard. Darren found her there moments later. He said nothing at first, just studied her face in the torchlight, seeing not the frightened widow from the graveyard, but the woman who'd just claimed her crown through sheer will. You didn't just survive, he said quietly, something like a roughening his voice. You conquered. Isabella met his eyes, and for the first time since accepting his proposal, she truly believed it herself. The Northern Pack's emissaries arrived 3 days after Vale's arrest, their heads bowed in respect rather than challenge. They'd witnessed Isabella's strength, seen Darren's unwavering defense of his queen, and understood that this kingdom would not fracture. Peace terms were signed by the week's end. Lady Serena's exile came quietly. Loyal servants finally spoke of forged letters and poisoned whispers, and she departed in disgrace before the winter snows arrived. Nearly a year passed like water smoothing stone. Winter settled over the kingdom with crystalline beauty, frost painting the windows in delicate patterns, but the throne room glowed with warmth and renewed stability. Isabella had transformed from the grieving widow at the graveside into something magnificent. A Luna Queen respected by the pack, feared by those who'd once dismissed her, and trusted absolutely by her king. On a crisp evening, Darren found her in the royal gardens beside a simple memorial stone she'd commissioned for Edmund. His heart clenched, fear whispering that perhaps she regretted everything, that he'd stolen her from a love she could never release. Isabella turned at his approach and moonlight caught the tears on her cheeks. I used to think loving again meant forgetting him, she said softly. But you taught me that the heart doesn't replace, it expands. Darren's breath caught. He moved forward, then slowly, deliberately, knelt before her just as he had at that first graveside a year ago. I love you, Isabella. Not because I needed a queen, but because you became the reason I want to be a better king. Isabella pulled him to his feet, her own tears flowing freely now. I love you too. Her voice broke on something between laughter and sob. And I'm carrying your child. His hands trembled as they found her face, and then they were embracing, two people who'd been shattered, learning that love wasn't about arriving whole. It was about choosing to heal together, piece by broken piece. Isabella took his hand and placed it gently against her still flat belly. Darren's silver eyes shimmered as he pressed his forehead to hers. Thank you, he whispered, for choosing me back. And so ends the tale of Isabella Craighill and Darren Brave, two broken souls who discovered that the strongest packs are built not from perfection, but from choosing to stand together when the world demands you fall. But the pack stories don't end here. If you loved watching Isabella transform from a grieving widow into a fierce Luna Queen, then you won't want to miss my next video. Another alpha, another battle, another love story forged in fire awaits you. So stay loyal to the pack. Subscribe if you haven't already, hit that notification bell so you never miss when the next story drops, and I'll see you in the next adventure. Until then, may you find your own strength in the most unexpected places. The pack runs together. See you soon.